It is August 28th, 1984. Your friend from school is having a sleepover and after pizza and birthday cake tells you to pick up the phone and dial a number. Expecting a 7-digit number in a prank call, you're surprised when it is just 3 digits. 322. You lift the receiver to your ear, slowly dialing, hearing the dial tone change as you press each number. The phone rings as your friend stands next to you, grinning. Then the line connects. Out of nowhere, a barrage of touch-tone numbers fly at your ears, 8 per second. It sounds almost like a melody. Then it repeats, again and again. Then, as soon as it had begun, the touch-tone melody ceases, and the line abruptly disconnects. What was that, you ask? That, your friend declares, is 322. Like many word-of-mouth bits of information from before the browser internet days, the what almost always escaped the why. And you had to go to bed that night wondering what the number is for, what the melody means. Decades later, you ask your friend about it. Hey, you say over social media, remember 322? What's that? He replies. You explain the story. I was at your house. You had me dial 322. I still remember the melody exactly. I have no idea what you're talking about. You start to ask others from the era that were around. Surely you shared what you had learned, just as your friend had. But no one else remembers the number or the melody. You search online for anything. Nothing. Like other misplaced memories, you find yourself thinking about the Mandela Effect. How, you wonder, can you be the only one that remembers this? Welcome to Paranormal Possibilities, where we talk about what is possible, what is probable, and what is unlikely. Today we're talking about the Mandela Effect and whether or not regional memory can shape or alter the phenomenon. We will also consider what, besides faulty memory, might be causing the Mandela Effect. By now the term Mandela Effect has spread across the internet and the cultural zeitgeist, but in case you're only casually familiar with the term, I want to spend a moment defining it and why it deserves more interest. Nelson Mandela was a South African activist who fought against apartheid. He was imprisoned for his activities opposing the apartheid government, spending 27 years in prison before being released in 1990, and later became president of South Africa. But strangely, some people distinctly remember Mandela dying in prison years earlier, even recalling news reports and public mourning. This shared false memory became known as the Mandela Effect. Once the false memory phenomenon had a name, people began to identify other such widespread instances. With the rise of the World Wide Web, such information spread rapidly, and there are now many lists online of Mandela Effect phenomena. From Darth Vader saying, "No, I am your father," instead of "Luke, I am your father," to Jif peanut butter being called Jiffy, to the mascot from Monopoly having a monocle when he doesn't, there are many examples. This is one of those paranormal topics that might seem on the surface to be easy to dismiss. Luke, I am your father makes sense because outside the context of the film, this line of dialogue makes it instantly clear who is speaking and who is listening. Jif peanut butter was popular in the 80s alongside Jiffy muffin mix, and both products would almost certainly have been in grocery sacks together in the back of station wagons across the country. But if you dig deeper, there are interesting possibilities that point to something larger going on. For the purposes of this episode, I'm going to focus on 3 of my own Mandela Effect memories and why they might be more than just my own faulty memory. Let's start with the song Bravado by Rush. Written by the legendary drummer Neil Peart, the first line when I first heard it was, "If we melt our wings flying too close to the sun." This is a reference to Icarus, who in Greek mythology ignored his father Daedalus's instructions not to fly too high, or the sun would cause the wax holding his wings together to melt. If you're interested in Icarus and whether or not Daedalus actually built wings that soared, I have a video about that I will link down in the description. But here's the thing. Just a few years ago I listened to the song and caught something weird. The lyrics were different, changed. I thought maybe it was a different version, maybe for a concert Rush changed it on the fly. Now the lyrics read, "If we burn our wings flying too close to the sun." This change from melt to burn doesn't make sense. Icarus's wings melted, they didn't burn, so why would burn be in the lyric? And yet it is. And despite my memory, it apparently always has been. Second, we have Chick-fil-A. There was a Chick-fil-A in Memorial City Mall in Houston in the 80s where I grew up. I'd never heard of Chick-fil-A before, but my family wanted to try it and we were already in the food court. Confused, I turned to my grandmother who was with us and said, "Why isn't it pronounced Chick-fil-A since that's how it's spelled?" To which she replied something like, "Chick is short for chicken in this case." This is more than just me misremembering that there wasn't a K in the name. I wouldn't have asked about chic if there was a K. Chick in that case is obvious. Chic isn't. Which brings us back to the one I opened the episode with, 322. This was a real number. The melody you heard in the intro was exactly how it sounded, though I recreated it with sound samples for the purpose of this video. The number no longer works, probably hasn't in decades, and for most of the world, it never existed. It is possible that Neil Peart, who was an exceptional songwriter, wrote Burn instead of Melt on purpose, and because I knew the story of Icarus prior to hearing the song, maybe I heard Melt. It is possible that when I asked my grandmother about chic filet, I was just being a funny kid, or a tall person was standing in front of the K. It is possible that 322 was never real and I dreamed it, and I'm not confusing it with a real memory. Perhaps, but some of these memories contain enough specific contextual detail that I think they're worth investigating beyond simply dismissing them as unreliable memory. Consider instead that perhaps we are shifting through realities and crossing the dimensional divide between universes. And if we're not, maybe the memories themselves are. There are various scientific concepts within physics that at least brush up against the broader idea that the reality we experience may not be all that exists. For example, Everett's many worlds interpretation, where quantum mechanics is interpreted without wave function collapse, with different outcomes represented in branches. We also have cosmological multiverse concepts, which are models in which our observable universe may not constitute everything that exists. And we can't forget extra dimensions or brain type theories, though to be fair, additional dimensions aren't synonymous with alternate Earths. I'm not claiming that any of these explain the Mandela Effect. I'm simply pointing out that the idea that our universe might not be the only one isn't confined to science fiction or paranormal investigation. Serious physicists have been asking versions of that question for decades. Which leads me to a thought experiment. Imagine, if you will, a vinyl record floating in space, in between the orbits of Neptune and Pluto. Its edge is facing the sun in a vertical pole-to-pole orientation. Next to it on each side are another record with just a small gap of 6 inches between them. These appear parallel, but every record is equidistant to the sun, and every record is perfectly aligned with its edge facing to the sun. The records you can see in front of you, as they stretch out to the sides in either direction, appear to run in a perfectly straight line, but only because the distance and angle of each record is so infinitesimally small, they appear parallel. This ring of records stretches all the way around the sun, 214 trillion in number. Now imagine your universe is one of the 214 trillion. You are the needle dragging your life through time along the groove of the record in which you live. You don't have any concept of the other records that exist. For you, the groove and the music you hear is all there is. Then suddenly, the needle skips. You jump. Now you're suddenly on a different record, in a different groove. You don't notice anything different overall. Everything is nearly identical, but for reasons you can't understand, now you remember a child's book called Berenstain Bears, which is now Berenstain. Fruit of the Loom no longer has a cornucopia in the logo, and somehow never did, despite the fact that you can picture it exactly. This is a different universe you are now in, but because the records are just 1.68 trillionth of a degree of a different angle, nearly everything you notice is trivial and inconsequential. In this thought experiment, sometimes the needle skips further, maybe 2 records over, maybe 20. The further from your home universe you move, the more dramatic the difference is. Maybe 1,000 records away from your original universe, the capital of California is no longer Sacramento. For them, it's Rialto, and always has been. Or Coca-Cola is no longer the red canned soft drink. Now it's something called Foamy's Cola. For this thought experiment, let's consider 2 ways information might travel between these records, these universes. The first one I'll call the swap theory. In swap theory, there are an infinite number of you, one in each universe. If you live on record 3,400, you might swap with the you who lives on record 3,401 or 3,399. In this theory, nothing is created or destroyed, and because the realities are so similar, neither of you knows anything happened. If you swap with someone farther away, the changes are more obvious. It's important to call out that discovering your first Mandela Effect wouldn't tell you when you swapped places. It would just be the first recognizable difference. The second one I'm calling the memory leak theory. In this one, no one moves. You don't jump to another record or switch with another you, but the information itself, as memories, move across universes like interdimensional packet data. In this model, a false memory and an accurate memory of something that happened in some other universe would be indistinguishable. Also, like the swap theory, the difference between the memory's original universe and your own dictates how dramatic and different your memory is. There are stories and reports of people who wake up in their bed, but everything else about their life is different. Their spouse is different, their job. So much is different that they aren't sure what is happening and have gaps in their memory of how they reached this point. Other channels have done videos about specific examples, and I may cover them in future videos. Let me know in the comments if that is of interest. Circling back to my own Mandela Effect example, I investigated to see if there was evidence of Houston 322. I dug into what I could find online, including old Southwestern Bell Telephone Company documentation confirming that networks used a variety of obscure dialing codes and test lines for technical purposes. For example, they used ANAC codes and other test lines to troubleshoot connection issues and line operations. Perhaps the number, when dialed, was an internal Southwestern Bell tool. That's reasonable, but no record of it was found, and such a specific repeating pattern that sounds like a melody is odd. Now suppose Houston 322 exists on records 950 through 1050. Outside that range, perhaps it never existed, or exists as a different code. If the Mandela Effect is a real phenomenon, perhaps the footprints of some dimensional exchange of memory, I think it may be easier to identify through regional differences, where specific details like local businesses, street layouts, phone numbers, and landmarks can provide much more precise points of comparison. Regional memories may also have an advantage. They're less likely to have been reinforced by decades of internet lists telling us what we're supposed to remember. If we're ever to truly investigate the Mandela Effect as anything other than faulty memory, being able to reliably identify who has what memories, then aggregate them, we may identify emergent patterns that point to some catalyst that affected them all. Once we can do that, maybe we can diagnose how such jumps across the dimensional divide, if that is what they are, happen. Perhaps those memories that the world tells you are false are all that you have left of where you came from. So now it is your turn. Tell me in the comments, what Mandela effects do you have in your life? Please like and subscribe if this video was of interest. My channel is still exploring the dimensional divide on YouTube, and I'm looking forward to growing it with you. And remember, the possibilities are endless.